All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. My name is Mike Moe, and I'm the Director of Tourism Development and Strategic Partnership for the Washington Tourism Alliance. We are so happy you can be with us today. We know this is a very busy time of year. We hope you get a lot out of today's program. And like I said, this program will be recorded, and I'll be sending it out in a follow-up email to all of our registrants. And so if you miss parts, you'll be able to review it later. This webinar is made possible thanks to the funding of the Washington State Department of Agriculture. Through a partnership with the Department of Commerce, the WSDA is providing relief and recovery grants and technical assistance to Washington agritourism farms. Over the past couple of months, the WTA has partnered with the WSDA to allocate these tourism grants, and this webinar is part of the technical assistance to help existing agritourism enterprises take their product to the next level and to hopefully inspire new agritourism programs. Since the passing of our enabling legislation in 2018, one of the main focuses of the WTA is to develop sustainable tourism and stimulate the economy in rural areas of our state. So this fits perfectly with our mission. Washington is a state of makers and producers. While we are known throughout the world for our apples, and our wine regions are becoming to rival even the most well-established regions in California and France, there is so much more to tell. And as you'll hear today, agritourism is more than just a story of a farm or a vineyard or an orchard. It's a story of community, and it provides an opportunity for partnership that can benefit an entire region. So, like I said, we have a full hour and a half for you, so let's get started. First, I want to introduce our keynote speakers. Dr. Lisa Chase is the director of the Vermont Tourism Research Center and is an extension professor at the University of Vermont. Her research and outreach focuses on intersection of food systems, farm viability, and community vitality. During the past 20 years, she has worked with farmers and food entrepreneurs throughout Vermont and around the world. In her free time, she loves visiting farms and experiencing cuisine and culture unique to each place. She was honored to be invited to share her work at the webinar today, but she wishes this were an in-person event and hopes to visit your farms throughout Washington soon. We also have Dr. Trever Lane. He's an award-winning and published associate professor and a state specialist in community and economic development at Washington State University Extension, with research and emphasis about the promising practice of agritourism. His leadership supports communities seeking to improve small business ecosystems, added value farm or ranch products, promoting farm fairs or festivals, and educating rural and tribal communities about the promising practice of agritourism. So welcome, Lisa and Trever. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Mike. Can you hear me okay? All right, and you see somebody give me a thumbs up. You see the slides okay? All right. Really appreciate being invited here to share some of what we've got going on in Vermont, around the world, and especially throughout the country. But before we dive into what we're going to be talking about today, I just want to get a sense of who is here with us. And I will say when I first got the invitation from Mike, I was like, I'm going to Washington. I'm fully vaccinated. Yeah, I can travel. And, then it turned out being on Zoom, which is a little more convenient, and I really appreciate the opportunity nonetheless, but I do hope to make it out to Washington to visit your farms at some point. First though, I would love to get a sense of who is here. So Mike, are you able to launch the poll? There you go. So everyone should see in front of you a question that says, describe yourself, check all that apply, and click as many boxes as hats you wear, and I know many of you wear many hats. And then once you've done that, I want to invite you to type into chat and let us know a little bit more about who you are, where you're from, and where you're at with agritourism. And I will say that when you type into chat, you can send just to the panelists, or you can click panelists and attendees. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering who else is here online with you. So if you don't mind clicking panelists and attendees, please fill out the chat and let us know what you want to learn about today and where you're coming from. And whenever Mike, you can kind of see when the answers start slowing down. So whenever your things slow down, if you want to post the results, then we can see who's here with us. There we go. And it looks like it's almost half producers, about a quarter tourism professionals, and 40% business owners and managers. A lot of overlap there, I imagine, and then quite a few nonprofits, government agencies, extension, educators, couple of researchers, and a bunch of other. Mike, would you be willing to now launch the next poll? One more question for you before we really jump into it, and that's how often do you work with agritourism? So there, you know, whether it's on your farm or you're a tourism professional or extension, is this like part of your everyday job? Oh yeah, agritourism, I know that, I do that. Or is this one of the first times that you're really hearing about it and thinking about it and getting involved? So take a moment to click how often you work with agritourism, and then Mike will share the results as soon as they slow down, as soon as the responses slow down. And I will say that ideally I would be in Washington with you on some beautiful farm or ranch or vineyard, or but also ideally we'd be in a room together and we'd be able to see each other and connect. And I know how hard, I spend way too much time on Zoom, so I know how hard it is to sit there on Zoom and stay engaged and pay attention. So that's why, we've got polls like this that will pop up every now and then, and we want to invite you to type into chat or Q&A at any time. You don't have to wait till the official Q&A section. If a question pops in your mind, put it into Q&A, or, I feel like the chat is sort of, every time you go to a conference, there's sort of like a few people in the back of the room, kind of like gabbing together and getting to know each other and networking. That's what chat is for. And, my feeling is in these types of webinars, that's good. Like, you don't have to be 100% just paying attention to the screen. It's hard to do that. If you connect, if you see someone introduce themselves in chat, or if somebody else asks a question and you actually have a good answer yourself, don't be shy about getting engaged and typing into chat. Looking at the poll results here, it looks like almost half are regularly involved with agritourism. And we've got almost a quarter that are not yet, but planning to in the future. So good mix. The rest of are in the occasionally or rarely section. All right, now I'm gonna jump into the slides by starting off with a little bit of background on agritourism. And what I want to emphasize is that while this term agritourism is new, the concept of traveling and gathering on farms and ranches has been around for probably as long as agriculture has been around. Native American tribes traveled long distances for planting and harvesting feasts and ceremonies. And when Europeans started immigrating to the US and other countries also started coming to the US, they brought their own traditions, and many of these centered around gatherings on farms and ranches. In the 1800s, as migrants were traveling west from Vermont to Washington, for example, there weren't so many country inns or places to stay. If they had the money or they were willing to work, they would stay at farmhouses. And as the US became increasingly urbanized in the 1800s, families living in cities would visit farms to escape the summer heat and learn about farming and rural life. That continued into the early 1900s with the rise of dude ranches in the West and festivals for special crops, like the Apple Blossom Festival in Wenatchee. And I bring up this because, as far as I know, this is one of the longest running agriculturally related festivals that we know of. I mean, this is something, in Vermont, when we're talking about long running festivals related to agriculture, the Apple Blossom Festival in Washington comes up. So I brought it up just to say that it's, it started out as a way to celebrate agriculture and has changed over time. I have not had the pleasure of going, but my understanding is you now attract over 100,000 visitors, not last year in the pandemic, but aside from pandemic years, you've got over 100,000 visitors, and it is a festival that goes on for days and has all sorts of different activities. Some people would say that's agritourism. Other people would say, no, not exactly. And that brings us to our next slide, which is, what is agritourism anyway? I bring this up to say, not to say that we're going to like get into the weeds of what is the definition of agritourism, but I feel like here we are talking about it for the next hour or so. We might as well all get on the same page about what it is. So the short answer is there are many definitions, you know, even within the state of Washington, certainly throughout the country, and then certainly throughout the world. And this graphic that you see here was developed because a multi-state team of extension colleagues got together and said, we got to come up with a definition. Well, we didn't really come up with a concise definition. Instead, we came up with a conceptual framework that talks about where there's agreement and where there's not. Where the agreement is working farms and ranches and vineyards and aquaculture. I'm going to apologize right now that being from Vermont, I have a tendency to just say farm. No, when I say farm, I mean farms, ranches, vineyards, aquaculture, other ways of producing food, fiber, and fuel. So the core of agritourism is being on a working farm or ranch and providing an experience or product sale that is closely tied to agriculture, such as overnight farm stays, harvest festivals on the farm, or pick your own. There's a variety of different types of agritourism. And then the part that where there is disagreement is those peripheral tiers. And that's where the activities take place off farm, like an apple blossom festival, for example, or it's on the farm, but it's not so closely connected to agriculture, like a concert on the farm. Some would say yes, some would say no. And depending on whether it's for policy purposes, measurement purposes, or marketing purposes, there's going to be a lot of different definitions, and we don't have to all agree and get on the same page. But for measurement purposes, it's helpful to understand that there's 5 overall categories that people look at: direct marketing, hospitality, recreation, entertainment, and education. We knew agritourism had hit the big time when in 2018, an expensive industry report came out. And this is pre-pandemic. They estimated that the global agritourism market was a little under $6 billion, with growth projected at 12% per year, bringing it to $13 billion by 2025. And people were blown, people who worked in agritourism were like, oh yeah, I understand, that's what we're seeing. People who didn't work in agritourism were surprised at the tremendous growth. Obviously, that's seen a hit during the COVID pandemic, but this is anecdotally now, we're still working on collecting good data. But what I'm expecting is that by 2025, we are likely to surpass that 13 billion global market number, because I think what we're going to see is agritourism is going up, and then there's a big drop in 2020 for the pandemic. Already what I'm hearing anecdotally from Farm Stay USA and Oregon and other operators around the US is that 2021 levels of demand are higher than anything they've seen before. And they're already getting requests for bookings from 2020 for 2022. So I'll be interested to hear what you folks are experiencing in Washington. But I think this demand for safe, healthy outdoor experiences, especially ones that are close to home, where people don't necessarily have to travel very far, that's something that is really growing and is going to continue. Projections are that it will continue into the future. And one of the things we saw in Vermont that I expect many of you saw was that the increase for direct sales grew during the pandemic. So farms that were able to sell direct to their communities did really well last year. Now focusing specifically on agritourism in the US. These numbers are from 2017. So again, pre-pandemic, this is from the USDA Census of Agriculture. And here we see that agritourism brought in almost $4 billion in 2017. And that's a combination of direct sales of food and agritourism and recreational services. There's over 150,000 farms throughout the country. And as you can see on this map, it's everywhere, but especially on the coast. And Washington is a very important place for direct sales and agritourism. That USDA Census of Agriculture gives us some baseline information, and it's conducted every 5 years. So we can look at trends. The next one will be in 2022. However, all it really asks is, are you doing agritourism and direct sales? And if so, how much money are you bringing in? There's tons of, for those of you who fill out the Census of Ag survey, you know there's lots of other questions about your farm and ranch. However, in terms of really digging into what are you doing on your farm that's related to agritourism, not a lot of detail there. So we conducted a national survey, and it just coincidentally ended in February 2020, right before the pandemic hit. So we have this snapshot of agritourism throughout the US. We heard from almost 2,000 respondents representing all 50 states. However, it's right before the pandemic, and we're planning another one this winter to get a sense of how things have changed during the past couple of years. I'm going to gloss over some of these results, but know that this information is available online if you're interested in learning more. I'm going to start off with some regional comparisons. Roughly 26 of the respondents were from the West, and that tan color you'll see in the upcoming slides, where in every region, on-farm direct sales was the most popular way of bringing visitors onto your farm. But education, events and entertainment, and recreation also were important. Lodging came in at a little over 20% of the farms that responded in the West. Again, the tan color is the West. And the West had, a slightly higher amount of farms with lodging responding to the survey than the other regions. Here's an interesting look at the crops. And I bring this up to, I know you know the crops that are grown around you. These are the crops specifically for the respondents, and I should say the products, crops, animals, and value-added products of respondents. And again, that tan at the bottom is the West. And the icons in these boxes actually represent the relative amount. So value-added products, for example, a lot of jams, salsas, and also wine is big in your region. What I'm going to point out here is that these numbers tell you how many respondents are doing this. So almost 2/3 of the respondents in the West have crops of some kind. 43% have animals or animal products, and almost half, a very high percentage, offer value-added products. These numbers add up to way over 100%. And what that tells you is that the farms that are open to visitors are highly diversified for the most part. There are occasionally you get farms with only 1 or 2 products, but generally the ones with agritourism are very diversified. Looking at where farms are located and how big they are. And again, these are the farms open to visitors. In the West, they tend to be closer to an urban area, and the median acreage was 40 acres, which is a little smaller than other regions and also closer to urban areas. We asked agritourism operators about their motivations, why they do agritourism specifically, and boiled it down into 3 different categories: financial goals, personal and family goals, and also community-related goals. Here's a chart that compares the various different goals. And as you can see, for motivations, increasing farm and ranch revenue is king. That's number 1. The green is this very important or very important to you? And 94% said it was. Then the blue is, how successful do you feel that you are in achieving this goal? And here we see that people feel a little less successful with revenue than they do with some of the other goals, like providing family employment and enjoying social interaction with the public. So it's important for us as extension agricultural service providers, it's really important to keep in mind the different varieties and types of goals and motivations that farms have, knowing that while revenue and income is important, there are several other types of goals as well. Looking at agritourism and farm revenues, the solid bars are total farm revenue, and the line is agritourism revenue. And by far the vast majority of the farms that responded to the survey fall in the small to medium size range. So 5,000 to 250,000 in revenues for agritourism or for their whole farm. And here we look at agritourism profitability. And this slide I want to point out is a little concerning because we have this big bar over on the left side. Over a quarter of the farms that responded made no profit. For some of them, they acknowledge that wasn't their goal, but for, over 90%, agritourism profitability is a goal, and that's something we really need to work on. So as I get towards the end of the presentation here, I want to mention that we asked farms about their challenges. What's most concerning to them? And here you see the top 10. A lot of these are challenges for every farm and really just about every type of business. Time management, labor, especially today, can really hard to come by. Developing a business plan, availability of operating capital. Those are standard concerns for many farms. However, there are some that are specific to agritourism, and that's where we get into liability issues, marketing your operation, insurance for having visitors, and managing visitor access. So being with Extension, my job is to provide support for farms. And this is where we asked, what are the supports that you most urgently need? And remember, these responses are from before the pandemic. I think what may have changed is these needs haven't gone away. There's just now more on the list, or some of the order may have shifted a bit. So looking at the top 6 supports needed, 4 of them are related to marketing: social media, marketing and management, marketing plan development, resources for the public on locating agritourism enterprises, and website management. And this is why it's so encouraging that this webinar is put on by the Washington Tourism Alliance and the Department of Ag, because partnering with these agencies who, especially tourism agencies who know how to market, not just for your farm or ranch, but for the entire state or for at a community level, those partnerships are key for addressing some of these marketing concerns. And then the legal and liability information and safety information for having on-farm visitors. Those are areas where those organizations can help, and also Extension can play a big role there. And I would expect that if we do this, we're doing this survey now, the safety information due to COVID would be a lot higher than it is. Not that any of these other ones would go away, but I think safety and liability have become an even greater concern. I want to close by sharing a few links with resources, and I'll share these with Mike. So, don't feel like you have to write them down. You can reach out to me with an email, or maybe Mike will send a follow-up email and we'll include this information. So there's a website at the bottom here. And at this website, on this website address, we have all sorts of resources specifically for farms and service providers supporting farms with agritourism. Everything from getting started to what kind of agritourism should I do, to moving into the financial planning, the safety, liability, and regulations, and the marketing. And then we've got a whole extra section for dealing with the evolving COVID pandemic. I also want to point out For those who are more interested in the research, we've got a link to a website that has summaries and reports and all sorts of information if you want to dig deeper into the findings from the survey of agritourism. And finally, I want to close with an invitation to come to Vermont in August of 2022. We are putting on an international conference that's going to be held in Vermont, and we want to invite all of you to join us for this 3-day conference. There's a good chance, we hope you can come in person. There's a good chance we'll turn it into a hybrid type of event. And we'll create some opportunities to connect virtually, but it will be a pretty amazing experience to connect with people working in agritourism, producers, as well as researchers, extension, tourism professionals working with agritourism, and also to showcase what you've got going on in Washington. So I will close here by saying I hope I get to meet you in Vermont or perhaps Washington, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Trever.
Good morning. Let me get my screen share going. What an honor to be here with such an engaging group of folks. And I have to admit that this is one of the more fun aspects of my job that really isn't work. And some days I have to wonder how I got so lucky. There we go. Let's turn this thing on. Hopefully. So here on the starting screen, we've got a few examples of some of my work in Eastern Washington, and the Wild Rose Prairie Association is a cooperative of small farms in a very rural area that's probably 20-30 miles north of Spokane. The Green Bluff is also a cooperative of agritourism operators. They're a little more commercial. It's a lot more traffic and density in the activities and events and participation, both from the producers as well as the attendees. But we also have quite a few lavender farms throughout Eastern Washington that I work with as well. I came to Washington in 2014. I'm a member of the Washington Festivals and Events Association, but I really enjoy assisting communities, farms, and ranches with mapping agritourism routes, storytelling for marketing or web design, and creating cooperatives to improve outreach and organization. My first presentation was in Fearn County in 2014. The largest presentation I've had was in Skagit County with over 300 attendees. And we did an 8-hour seminar in Spokane, which is the longest workshop that I've done. And so today, I want to talk a little bit about getting started in Fearn County because I really attribute my success to the work done there. It's an area where people retire, folks who live there for many generations really prefer their privacy. And so the ability to get people to open up their farms and allow people onto their property has shocked quite a few people that are familiar with the state that I was able to map and get that many people to participate. And coming out of that was a lot of lessons learned in terms of what motivates farmers and ranchers, what their challenges are, what the barriers are, because Fearn County is extremely impoverished, high unemployment, and there's been a real change to the local economy. And agritourism used to be about 22% of the local economy, and it's less than 4% now. So pulling all this together and making it work has really given me a stepping stone to working across the state. As a state specialist serving dually as the director in Fearn County, that work is critical to everything that I do, because if it works there, I found that it'll work anywhere. As Lisa mentioned earlier, the Wenatchee Apple Blossom Festival gets a lot of attention. It's one of our older agricultural festivals. Some people argue that festivals aren't agritourism, but typically they have farm stands, farmers markets. They're farm related in a sense, and they're very similar to fairs, which many people do consider agritourism. And so I wanted to mention that, as well as the Ephrata Sun and Sage Festival, which began in 1914. It's a much smaller festival, but it's been around for over 100 years. And of course, the Tulip Festival, it draws people to their farms. I've been working with Tulip Town for quite a while and the Tulip Festival producers since I arrived. And this has been an exciting event to watch it grow and evolve. And to go out there and stand among the blossoms is really, it's overwhelming. I've also done some work with Native American agritourism, a little bit, mostly on the east side, slowly was working towards the west side before the pandemic. But really, they focus a lot on education, food, their villages, and the culture that go into agritourism and how they feed themselves. And as you see on the right, there's fisheries and hatcheries that are a big part of their economies, and they do tours. They invite people out to come walk through and see the processing facilities. And that's a really neat experience. And I highly encourage anybody to take a tour and go do that. Before Lisa's study, one of the things that got me engaged and motivated was to see that from 2002 to 2012, the USDA began to really study agritourism and the promising practice that it projects. Based on those studies, many moons ago when I was finishing up my doctorate, they projected that annual growth would be around 4%. And we are continuing to see that growth. But as we're going to find, people don't always do it for the money. There's other motivations and reasons for why they get involved and get started. I think this is an amazing slide. I just wanted to remind everybody that Lisa's work really draws the attention to how widespread agritourism is. And although the definition is a little all over the place, and sometimes people can argue about the events and activities, the reality is there's a lot of farm activity and education that goes on across the country and on the West Coast. And what I found through the promising practice research is that farmer and rancher motivation, knowledge, and organizational influences are what impact their ability to get started and success. This is known as the KMO model. And I use it to kind of assess the landscape, where people are with the processes. Well, what does this mean at the end of the day? So typically, most people know what they like and they like what they know. And that's very true with farmers. Once we know something works, we like to replicate that. And we have found that we need to know how farmers and ranchers think in order to help them develop their operations so that we can better serve them as well. And we found that farmers need to know what agritourism is. They need to know the steps and the rules or the regulations. And we've also found that mental models are extremely important. And this is that whole, we like what we know and we know what we like. And it's easier to step through things that we're familiar with, even if it's an indirect familiarity. Slide here. The very nerdy scholarly stuff, I'll try to distill it down very simply. Basically, we all want to appreciate the value, whatever that value is, whether it's bringing people to farm, to promote your products so that you can sell more of your crops and produce. You got to believe in your abilities. If you don't believe in yourself, that can be challenging too. And at the end of the day, we have found that success must be measurable or quantifiable, even if that sum amount is $0. Just to kind of know what it will or won't do helps operators figure out what they do and don't want to do. The other thing we found is that organizational influences are critical to how people get started. So having the WSDA, the WTA, and all the extension professionals here today, it's important that those organizations are at the forefront like we are. And it's reassuring as I work with individual farms and farmers to know that those resources and that support is there, and they're trusted resources, because that's the critical piece, is the trust. One of the things that we found when I was doing research is that those causal relationships really hinge on trust. And the quote there at the bottom of this slide is really indicative of that. I hear that quite a bit on the east side, and I was a little shocked when I was doing research to learn that that's a thing on the west side too, because in Washington, the east side and the west side are divided by the Cascade Mountains, and it's two different worlds out here. And to know that that common baseline of trust is critical in our work really helped me know how to serve our operators better. Yeah, I want to bring up Lisa's slide again about the challenges. While it looks like there's a whole chasm of things that challenge people in getting started and potential barriers, the reality is it can all be distilled down to about 3 things. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, I saw a chat or a question in the chat about liability insurance. Hopefully here in a minute, I'll be able to answer or address some of those concerns. But access to capital is always tough. Rules, regulations, and fear of liability and startup costs can be expensive when they start aggregating. So business planning, talking through this with people that are successful are very critical elements. One of the greatest resources that I recommend everybody take a look at, large or small, is the Green Book from the WSDA. It's a handbook for small and direct marketing farms, and it covers everything that you could possibly think of. And in working with Snohomish County, we were able to develop specific COVID protocols that were then handed over to the WSDA for the final approval and working with the governor's office. So we were able to open up our small farms and ranches sooner rather than later. But COVID still did have a negative impact, but the WSDA has some really good resources available to help our operators. And then through my board work with the Washington Festivals and Events Association, we were able to champion SB 5808, which is farm indemnification. So that question earlier about insurance and liability with petting zoos and things like that, it's not foolproof. Insurance companies can drop you, but at the end of the day, the law does protect you. And the simple version of this sign is farming is hard work. And if you come on a farm, you could get hurt and maybe die. That's the 30,000 foot view and distilled version of what SB 5808 does. But by posting the sign, it allows people to come onto the property and the farmer to breathe a little bit better. At the end of the day, what I have found with the cooperatives like Wild Rose Prairie Association and Green Bluff, they do 3 things very well. They collaborate, they communicate, and they cooperate. And as you'll see, all of those areas, they map their routes, they market stuff very well, and they're very inclusive with other farms. Again, hoping that you will come join us in Vermont. It's been an honor and a pleasure working with Lisa and expanding my work internationally. And hopefully you will be able to join us, if not in person, but maybe virtually. Hopefully I'm doing okay on time. And that is the end of my presentation with my contact info.
Thank you, Trevor and Lisa. Now we do have a few questions, and I think we have a little bit of time to address those questions if you guys are up for it. The first question comes from Lynn Swanson. In your first slide, you had two pictures of children touching animals. We recently had our farm insurance company inform us they're not interested in providing insurance to us if we allowed people, especially children, touch our animals, and because they'd seen pictures on their website of grandchildren holding lambs. Can you address that concern?
I would point them to SB 5808 and maybe let the insurance company know that there is some indemnification in there that doesn't necessarily stop them from being held liable, but it does reduce the risk. It gives you an affirmative defense. And so maybe that'll help create those conversations or smooth some of that over. But if not, there are other insurance providers out there that I work with who do allow that. And I'm sure we could round up some of those names and point people in the right direction if there's not an opportunity to discuss that further.
Okay.
My first thought, which I thought maybe I shouldn't say this, but my first thought was find another insurance agent.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't say that, but like, I will tell you that in Vermont, we have a handful of insurance agents who really get agritourism, and they're supportive and they work with the farms and understand what the farms are trying to do. And then we have a lot of insurance agents that just like, I don't know, it just feels too risky for them. So we've been trying to, but insurance is costly, and it's good to have a good relationship with your insurance agent. So yeah, I would encourage you in Washington to share names about who is good to work with and who's not. And here's something that I want to see happening on regional or even a national level. I don't know if somebody wants to take this on, but insurance is extremely costly to begin with, and especially for agritourism, to the extent that like the National Farm Bureau or different groups start working together to really advocate for making agritourism insurance more available and affordable. I think that's a very important thing that we need to start doing on a national level.
Yeah, great. And I wonder, people have asked, a few people in the chat have asked if there are lists of insurance agencies that work with agritourism that they could find. Is that a resource out there?
I don't have a list. I was going to help try and compile a few names and create a small list, but I don't have a thorough list.
If anyone's in Vermont or the Northeast, I have a short list of insurance agents there, but I think and I get asked that all the time. So, and it's not that I can recommend anyone, but I can say that these are insurance agents that regularly work with agritourism. So I think that would be a really useful resource if people are willing to start sharing names and talking about who's really helpful with agritourism.
And that might be a place where the WSDA could help as well. And just for all the attendees, if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A chat, or a Q&A part, not the chat, because the chat, there's a lot of people going back and forth, so it's hard for me to keep up. Here's another question from Abba Kisler, might be Kaiser. Hi all, thanks for this presentation. Wanted to ask if there's a handbook available on how to run regional farms. And it sounds like the Green Book is a great handbook, right? And I put a link to the Green Book in the chat. So do you have any other resources people should check out?
Green Book is where my mind immediately went to. But I would also, look around to see if there's any cooperatives. I would find other farms, see what other maps exist, and see if you can join those. That's typically where a lot of really good planning and cooperation happens, is around these cooperatives.
Great. From Thane, our biggest challenge is hiring help. We are in our mid-60s and our bodies are getting tired. Love to get input on how to hire help without having to have actual employees.
This is a really important question, and I think right now, as we're coming out of the pandemic, labor has always been a challenging issue, and I feel like it's even worse right now than it has been. So I think we should crowdsource this answer. I have some ideas, but I'm going to invite everyone to type into chat what you're doing. I'll mention WWOOF, WWOOF. If you haven't started to work with that organization, it's hit or miss. Some farms have really good experiences with their volunteers, others don't. You allow a volunteer to live and work on your place, and you feed the volunteer, but you don't pay them, and it's not an official employee. There are internships and other ways to work with different people on your farm. However, you do have to be careful with labor laws, which vary depending on where you are. So that's something that the folks in Washington may know a little bit more about, some of the labor laws and hurdles related to bringing in interns and different types of temporary employees.
Great. So somebody else said that since collaboration for agritourism businesses is forefront, why don't we create a co-op insurance fund to support ourselves with SB 5808? That person's an attorney and has agritourism small farm too. It's an interesting idea. Is that something you've seen before, kind of in other states?
I don't know enough about the plan to know, where this is headed, but boy, these are exactly the kinds of ideas and collaborations that right now that are coming into chat that I would love to follow up on and see what happens, because, you come to workshops like this and they're interesting and sometimes entertaining, and then you leave and go back to what you're doing and forget all about it. To the extent that right now you're able to make connections and maybe even share information and get some traction on some of these ideas that you're exploring, I think that would be a huge benefit for bringing these folks together.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Lisa and Trevor. That was fantastic, and I hope everybody got, I mean, just the interaction that we've had with the attendees. I think everybody enjoyed it. So up next, we have Laura Raymond from the WSDA. She's a regional markets program manager, and she's here to give you more information on the support available through the WSDA. And we'll also hear from Marissa Valiant, the project manager for the Washington Food and Farm Finder. And just so you all know, we will be, I am recording this webinar, and this will be, I'll send you all a follow-up email with a link to the webinar. So you'll get all this information. It'll be on hand when you need it. Welcome, Laura.
Great, thanks, Mike. And thanks everyone for being here, taking time out of your day. This is a really exciting conversation for me because I am a huge fan of agritourism. As a visitor and a promoter through my role at the WSDA, where I lead the Regional Markets Program. And the Regional Markets Program is actually the melding of a few programs that we have at WSDA to specifically support direct marketing farms and farms that are oriented to selling in local and regional markets. So many of you are probably familiar with the Small Farm Direct Marketing Program historically, and also our Farm to School program. And today, there's already been many mentions of the Handbook for Small and Direct Marketing Farms, which is one of our publications. Many people know it as the Green Book because it has a green cover. And just because it's been mentioned so many times, I know there's a link in the chat. I actually wanted to just let you know how to find it online. It's a print resource, but it's also available as an online resource. So I'm gonna just share my screen really quickly to show you how to find it. So there's actually a shortcut link where you can go if you don't want to remember that whole long URL, and it's agr.wa.gov/farmfoodbiz. If you click that, it'll take you to this page. I mean, sorry, if you type that in, it'll take you to this page. And I just want to walk you through navigating this because I know sometimes it can get kind of confusing if you're used to something in print, how do you find it online? But this is the page. The book is organized into chapters. The one that I think is most relevant to us today is the Direct Marketing Strategies chapter. If you click on Read More, it'll take you to that chapter, and there's a whole series of fact sheets. The book itself is made up of 52 fact sheets, but there's a whole series of them focused on direct marketing strategies. And relevant to us today, I think, are the fact sheets on selling to individuals, which includes UPIC, sort of a classic agritourism activity, as well as, sorry for the scroll, I don't want to make you all dizzy, but want you to see here, a fact sheet which is new in the 2019 edition, specifically on culinary and agritourism. Or it's significantly built out, I should say. And that's actually an image there on the screen of Fearn River, and we'll be hearing from Crystie at Fearn River later in today's presentation. For some people, connecting with restaurants is a really important element of agritourism, and certainly as you're looking at developing regional partnerships and elevating agritourism within a region's destination promotion strategy. And so there's also a fact sheet on selling to restaurants. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat so that you can reach me directly if you have any questions about generally what our program does. We support direct marketing farms, as I mentioned, and that does include agritourism, although until this event, the last time we've really been able to work specifically on agritourism activities was many years ago when we received a grant to develop a series of Savor Washington itineraries for multiple regions around the state. So some of you may remember those. That's something we'd love to be able to do in the meantime. But one of the wonderful things is that really since then, there have been the emergence and growth of many other organizations that are also very organized and oriented to supporting regional trails, as Abba asked a question about earlier, farm tours and collaborative efforts to develop regional farm tours. And one of those organizations is Sustainable Connections up in Northwest Washington. And I'm going to turn it over to Marissa Valiant from there to talk a little bit about some of the work that they are doing through the Eat Local First Collaborative. And happy to take questions later. I just don't want to take too much of our time. You all can find me later.
Hi, Laura. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for having me. This is such a great gathering, and I appreciate all of the collaborative sharing of information and resources. So as Laura mentioned, I am the Food and Farming Marketing Coordinator at Sustainable Connections. We have been serving Whatcom, Skagit, San Juan, and Island counties for over 16 years and putting on farm tours and Eat Local Month. We also launched the original Eat Local First campaign, which has since expanded to be a statewide resource. And last summer, we launched the Washington Food and Farm Finder to be a statewide resource for all things food and farming, including over 700 listings of agritourism aligned businesses, whether that's farm stands or U-Pick. We also have indicators and filters for farms that offer farm stays, have picnic areas, you cut Christmas tree farms, anything you could really imagine. And listings are free at eatlocalfirst.org if you'd like to add your agritourism business. We would invite you to do that. And if you have questions about filling out listing information, info@eatlocalfirst.org is a great email address to contact us, and I will make sure to put that in the chat. Yeah, we're excited about summer promotions, and it's exciting to see the demand for safe outdoor activities and delicious Washington experiences. Anything else I can share?
Thank you, Marissa. That was fantastic. And if you go check out the Food and Farm Finder if you haven't yet. It's a really cool map that really helps people find your business. So we do have a couple questions in the chat, in the Q&A, I should say. Mark Beatty asks, how are the WSDA and WTA collaborating to attract international tourism back to Washington? No small task in a post-pandemic world. And yes, that is a big part of what we're doing, is trying to attract international visitors. And there's a number of ways we're doing that. As far as collaborating with WSDA and agritourism, I think it's really about, making sure that people know where to find you. And so that farm and food finder is a great resource. And then it's putting together food trails, and then putting together products that we can then take to international markets and market them. And so we're still just getting started with that, but that is definitely on our radar. And like I said in the beginning, it's a really big part of our story as a state. Like I said, we're a state of makers. And so agritourism is a huge part of all that. Laura, do you have anything to add there?
No, simply to add that this particular collaboration is one of the first steps in that direction. And so as part of the relief and recovery grants that WSDA is offering, we just finished, or we're in the process of awarding over $2 million in grants to relief and recovery grants to agritourism farms. And we really followed the definition that Lisa mentioned at the outset of activities on active working farms. Through that through that funding opportunity, we're also able to work with WTA specifically to host this webinar. And our hope with this webinar is that, in addition to hopefully walking away with some really helpful practical information and resources, we'll also begin to stitch a stronger network between those in our state that are working on tourism, destination development, promotion, and support, and producers who are engaged in agritourism. There's so much that we can do, and I really think that we have a long ways to go from where we are right now, and it's exciting to get that started.
Yeah, and Laura mentioned destination development. And that's something we're very interested in, and we're going into each region and putting on workshops around destination development. And agritourism is a part of that. And so there's much more to come, and there is funding behind it. And so we're very excited about the potential that we have in our state here. Another question: I breed 2 rare breeds of sheep and have interest from both private chefs and restaurants for my meat, but I have not been able to grow my business in that way or by having a farm to table dinners because of the USDA processing requirement. I do not have access to a USDA facility unless I'm willing to transport my lambs 5 to 6 hours, which has a significant impact on meat quality. Wondering if there's any activity towards changing those regulations similar to what Wyoming has done. Laura, you're on mute there.
Sure, yeah. I want to make sure I was tracking that question. That's really about small scale meat processing. That's a little bit outside of the scope of agritourism specifically, but just to let you know, yes, WSDA is working on that issue. Earlier this year, we were able, with CARES relief funding, to offer a grant to support small scale meat processors to scale up with infrastructure. And coming out of this last legislative session, we also have additional funding to offer additional grants, as well as provide more direct technical assistance and market access support for ranchers, meat producers, and processors. So just stay tuned to the WSDA for more on that coming in the next 2 years.
Great. Anything else to add, Laura, before we move on?
No, I think it's more exciting to hear from our panelists. So people know how to find me, and please do.
All right. Thank you so much, Laura, and thank you, Marissa, for that fantastic information. And there's tons of resources in that chat. So hopefully you guys have been following that and are copying it and pasting it somewhere so you have it at your ready. So up next, we have a panel discussion. We have Crystie Kisler. She is the co-founder of Fearn River Farm and Cidery, and she does outreach from the heart of Fearn River Farm and Cidery, advocating for small-scale family agriculture, rural vitality, artisan food production, local economies, and community-based enterprise. She's also the author of Farm Wife Diaries blog. Welcome, Crystie.
Hi there, good to be here.
Thank you. And then we also have, oops, let me get my screen back here. We have Amy Lum of Lum Farms. Lum Farms is located in the historic Cofelt Farm Preserve and incorporates neighboring pastures. They work together with county and landowners to improve pastures and forest land through sustainable grazing practices. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Thank you for being with us. And we were also supposed to have Raymond Southern, and he is a chef and one of the proprietors of Kingfish at West Sound. He prepares creative cuisine featuring local ingredients sourced primarily from right there on Orcas Island, including Lum Farms. And unfortunately, Raymond is having some technical issues, and so we don't have Raymond with us right now, but I'm going to keep my eye out in the attendee list to see if he makes it in here. So first, let's just get kind of your backstory. Crystie, tell us about Fearn River and how it came to be, and just about the history of your beautiful property.
All right, well, some of you caught River walking through the screen there a moment ago. So that was the River of Fearn River, who we started plotting our farm dream when he was born, and he just graduated from high school. So that gives you a sense of how long we've been working on it. And I just want to say, I know there's friends and neighbors on the panel here who've heard this 100 times, but I hope some of you are new to this story, and I appreciate the time to share it. So yeah, it's so interesting putting our story in the framework of ag tourism, because we didn't set out to do ag tourism, but we did set out to do what we considered sort of community-based small-scale agriculture, and the tourism part of it emerged as people started showing up from all over, and we thought, oh, okay, that's what's happening now. But we started as a small diversified farm. We're over here in the Chimacum Valley. It's traditional territory of Chimacum and Sklallam and other Coast Salish people. And then it was historic dairy land for 100 years. And then by the time we got here, you had a lot of dairy farms and other properties that were sort of converting, and an economy, an agricultural and a sort of resource economy that was, I think, struggling to find new sort of solid ground. So we started in when did we start? Early 2000s, and just started doing everything. But we happened to buy a farm that had a U-pick blueberry patch on it, or it had 2 acres of blueberries. So we continued the tradition established by the previous owners, which was to open up for blueberry U-pick. And that was really the epiphany. I was an educator, and I had done outdoor education for years. So I knew that something special happens when people get outside, especially people who don't have sort of frequent access. But seeing people in the blueberry field, all of you who run, berry picking know exactly what I'm talking about. There's this sort of like ecstasy that happens when people are surrounded by ripe berries, unless there's not enough ripe berries, in which case the opposite happens. So through several years of doing U-pick, we sort of felt out the travails and triumphs of what we're all talking about as ag tourism, which was really giving people a chance to connect directly to the land. We continued to develop our farm economy, struggling to figure out how to make the sort of ends meet. We took on a lot of debt to purchase our farm, and knew we probably needed to do more value-added product line to make it work. We started making hard cider because our neighbor who had sold us the farm was making hard cider, and we thought that was charming and sort of historical and somewhat unknown. And we could add that to the mix of other things we were doing, which was organic vegetables and grains and honey and a little bit of everything. And then once we started producing and selling the hard cider, which was sort of a several-year process of logistical hurdles and paperwork and licensing, started to see that brought a whole nother slew of people out to the farm, and a more diversified group than I think who berry picking brought out. And then one thing led to another, and we continued to develop the other aspects of our farm, because once they were out here drinking, we wanted to make sure they were eating. And once they were eating or drinking, they might as well be listening to music. And if they were doing all that, let's do education and let's do seasonal celebrations. So it's all kind of evolved from there. Sorry, Mike, was that a longer answer than you wanted?
No, that was perfect. I think we have plenty of time here, and it's a very interesting story, and it's a success story about what you can do with agritourism. All right, Amy, tell us about Lum Farms.
Well, I moved to Washington State from Vermont in the early 90s. I met my husband, and he grew up here on Orcas Island on a very small homestead. They had a few farm animals, but I worked at a vet clinic as a technician. The vet got me involved with sheep and chickens, got my first dog. We started building, sort of adding to our menagerie, because we love to eat and we love food. And then we had kids, and they got into 4-H, and we started adding different animals to our menagerie. I started a small business doing needle felted products with the wool as a way to get together with a couple of friends and use the wool from our sheep. And we reached a point where we said, we need to either go big, because we can't afford all these sheep as I'm trying to get all the different types of wool that I wanted, or we go back to just having a couple of pet animals. We decided to go big and start marketing the meat and the wool and sheepskins and everything we were raising to try and reach out and engage with our community. And fast forward to about 5-6 years ago, we really became involved in our local farmers market, because we didn't have a farm where people could access us. We raised our animals on a lot of different properties, doing property management. And so we'd rotate our animals around and made wonderful connections with our local folks through food and through our farming. And in 2019, we had an opportunity to lease this historic farm, Kaufeld Farm, which is owned by the San Juan County Land Bank. And so we moved our whole farm here, which is now incredibly diverse, and thought, this is great. We're going to have this great farm. We'll raise our animals. We'll still do the farmers market. There's a little store on the property. So we put our value-added products, our sheepskins and our wool and all of our meats into the farm stand, and really started engaging with our community even more as we had a place. Then the pandemic came last year and everything changed for us in a big way. My daughter said, if I can't go to school, we can't have people in the shop. Like, we can't have people come into the store. So she put our store online and made contactless pickup and online ordering a possibility. And from there, our community, the need and living on an island and the food scarcity or the fear of food scarcity drew so many local folks to the farm to buy meats. We also started a goat dairy last year in the midst of the pandemic. We took on a goat dairy from the previous owner, and so started that. And the food bank reached out to us and needing food for folks who really were in need. Being on an island, you we have a lot of tourism. We're very tourist based, but there's also our local community is very, very succinct. Not a lot of movement between counties and things. So we just sort of opened up and said, we are going to just work with our community, and people really want to come onto the farm to see where their food comes from. And so we've worked with a lot of different school groups and the food bank and our local folks who really want to come and buy their food at the farm. This operation has blossomed from a family farm went from a small family farm to a large family farm on a beautiful county property to, I feel like it's a life of its own now. And we have a school group who has come every single week for the last year because they got to do school outside. And they work on the farm every week. They have a list of chores. We just started doing farm tours where people can sign up for it, and actually charging money for that, which is a different thing. But if we're going to be able to spend our time engaging with folks on a really detailed tour of the farm, we need to be paid for our time. It's a hard concept for a farmer to learn how to ask to be paid for your time. We also have a small free walk that people can do to engage with the animals. We figured out insurance, so we have a petting farm where people can pet the animals. Sort of worked through finding all the signs, the SB 5808 signage, and sort of it's been a real learning curve figuring out how to make our farm accessible in a safe and engaging way, and teach people about where their food comes from. We also work a lot with restaurants, and that's where Raymond comes in. I don't know. Yeah.
And Raymond, he just told me that he's on the phone with the internet company and they found the problem. He should be with us in 5 minutes. So,
great.
So I'm going to come back to you and Raymond.
Yeah.
Hopefully he'll be back here in a second. Crystie, I wanted to learn more about how you formed your vision and then implemented your mission. That process.
Yeah, well, as I said, I sort of started out an educator. I married a fifth generation Washington wheat farmer. So we came together from the beginning with a commitment to sort of wanting to grow food for the community, but also wanting to make it as sort of educational and interaction as possible. So it was really a hybrid of those things. And I think early on we settled on a mission statement, which was the Fearn River mission is to celebrate the beauty and bounty of the earth and to reconnect people to the land that sustains us and to grow community. And that those three things were sort of going to guide every step that we took: the celebration, the reconnection, and the growing of community. So I would say that mission also really formed in a series of relationships. And I think partnership and collaboration and relationship have been essential to us from the beginning. The sort of sense that we were part of a sort of a wave of other small scale farmers around here that were trying to do something similar. And this allowed us to sort of come together and lend energy together to, the revitalization of our farmers markets and outreach to sort of the markets and a sort of unified maybe message to the public. When we started our farm in Chimacum, the main intersection of Chimacum, for those of you who've been here, we call it the corner because it's the only one, sort of had an empty building on it. And a group of us local farmers came together and said, what if that was a farm stand? And one thing led to another, and a team came in to develop a farm stand there. And we asked the owners, as soon as they sort of solidified their plan, can you please put up a sign that says, Chimacum, we grow food here? It was sort of a joke. Like, can you just say we grow food here? And that's literally what they put on the sign. Welcome to Chimacum, we grow food here. So there's been a growing sense of sort of restored agricultural identity, because I think there was a very strong dairy agricultural identity here for many decades. So I think partnership, collaboration have been essential to us also through many of the organizations here today, WTA, WSDA, WSU, OPTC. I will often tell young farmers and entrepreneurs that I know that are starting to develop a model like this, make sure you have someone on your team who likes to talk and attend meetings, along with someone who likes to be on the tractor or be in the fields, because so much of this particular model is built on relationship and showing up for this conference and that meeting and meeting that person and following up. Just a lot of that. And so I can't speak sort of enough to the power of those relationships. And early on, I was in our WSU extension, actually, it was my first job in this county, was working in the WSU extension, answering phones. So I plugged in early on to the Green Book and to the early itinerary programs that Laura referred to. That was essential. And I also just want to say that I think the idea of interconnection was so fundamental to what we were doing that we literally, one of the annual events that we have participated in and now have sort of own at our place is called Interdependence Day. So we do this 2 weeks after usually the July 4th holiday, and we try and sort of magnify and celebrate this notion of interdependence. It all happens in relationships. So, and Mike, I guess I'll just also say that, our company now is a kind of partnership of multiple people, and we made a commitment to do something called B Corp certification, along with being certified organic and certified salmon safe. And B Corp is a voluntary certification that commits your company to triple bottom line practices, so people, planet, profit. And that's been a really helpful roadmap to kind of keep us on track, provide sort of guardrails for certain kinds of behaviors. As your farm sort of comes into commerce and tourism and these sort of market-based realities, we really wanted to stay grounded in relationship, care for the earth, care for the community. And this year, with the pandemic slowing things down, we were actually able to start a kind of parallel nonprofit called the Chimacum Center. So we could just go ahead and do that community-based stuff we wanted to do. So that's some of the mission context for how we operate.
Great, thank you. And now we have Raymond Southern, who's just had to overcome all sorts of obstacles to be here today. So Raymond, you're on mute right now, but thank you so much for joining us. And like I said before, Raymond is the chef and proprietor at the Kingfish Inn. And I became aware of both Amy and Raymond when I came to Orcas Island a few weeks ago with my kids, and I just wanted to see a farm. And I reached out to Raymond and said, oh, you have to go check out Lum Farms. And then after hanging out at Lum Farms, seeing the pigs and the chickens and we went to the Kingfish Inn and had an amazing meal that Raymond created for us, and a lot of the products came from Lund Farms. So I wanted to ask you, Raymond, how did that relationship grow between you and your local farm?
Well, not just with Eric and Amy, but it's grown throughout the years, and it's just kind of from each side we work on it through the years as well too. I first met Amy's husband Eric, years ago, and I actually met him just after moving here at the farmers market. And as a chef, the one thing about a farmers market is it's the one place you're going to see the farmers kind of thing. So we have a great farmers market here at Orcas Island. And, I still go to as often as I can. And especially in the first weeks and first years I was living here, I made a real choice of going there as much as I could to meet guys like Eric and other people that were there and whatnot. And, it's just when I think back to those days of, barely knowing each other and just stopping by and introducing myself and whatnot to what our relationship has become now. It's a friendship. It's more of a friendship than a business than anything, with not just with Eric and Amy, but so many other farmers. And it's a friendship where we happen to, where I happen to get whatever product that particular farmer may have. And, they find themselves here sometime at the restaurant, or if they have friends or family in town, they send them over, this kind of thing. And same like when you were here, if anybody's here and they're looking for like a unique experience like that, Amy's one of the first people I'm going to send them over to, because I just, the love for what she does is just amazing. And just to see any of what's going on her farm is incredible.
Now, Amy, there's been a couple of people in the chat who've had issues with, finding processing for their meat. Now, I know that you supply some of the restaurants on the island, and you also have, your store like actually on property where, it's really cool to watch the locals come in and out of that store. How were you able to overcome some of the issues that people are having?
Getting USDA certified meats is incredibly difficult. We are fortunate here in the San Juan Islands to be members of the Islands Grown Farmers Cooperative, which is a co-op that is a mobile slaughter unit that comes to the farms and will slaughter our animals right on site. And then they have a processing facility on the mainland. Right now it's in Bow. And so they cut and wrap according to our needs. It has meant that there are a lot of farms on Orcas and on all of the San Juan Islands. And so that means that all of us don't have to load our animals up, take a ferry, and travel to who knows where, to the larger facilities. They come right to us. The animals are humanely harvested, and we get our meat back, and it's our own. And it's been a great asset for all of the farms in our county. That's as far as when we raise chicken, meat birds as well, so broilers, and the county owns the processing equipment for harvesting the broilers, and we work with WSDA. You have to harvest your birds right on site, so we're fortunate to be able to have such a nice little farm stand, so we can use that equipment and sell our birds right on site. Other farmers can rent that equipment to bring to their farms to harvest their birds if they want to sell them to the public.
So it sounds like there was a collaboration kind of early on in your community. Obviously, being on an island, you have your own special, hurdles. But I wonder if that's something. I mean, I know that a lot of farms in Washington are out kind of by themselves, but I mean, maybe that's an opportunity for some, communities to think about.
I know that there are different communities and different groups that are trying to get some more of these mobile slaughtering facilities. It's just a great way to process your animals, because you don't have to stress them out hauling them somewhere. So I think the quality of your finished product is better if it's possible. So working with USDA and all of the all those legal hurdles is the big thing, and the financing, the money to get it to work.
All right. Well, we don't have too much time left. I want to ask one more question, and then we'll open it up to questions from our attendees. But Crystie, how did you utilize your partnership within your community to make your business and community better?
Yeah, I think I started to talk about that. I really felt like all of the tools, many of the tools that have been referenced today, you know, when you in your community, you need to sort of suss out the resource map. And luckily for us, we have an extension office, and so that has been. And Kelly Henwood, who I think is on the call now, she's the, you know, sort of sends out the monthly or the bi-weekly list of here's the grants, here's the tours, here's the seminars, here's the, you know. So finding out what your local network is and getting plugged into it, and then making sure that you're sort of following up and sort of attending the conversations like this, where someone mentions, you know, some tip that will sort of be a breakthrough for you. Fin River, we were really able to take advantage of many different, you know, programs and grant opportunities that came through WSDA and USDA. So we did a value-added producer grant. We did a rural business development grant. We did a rural energy for America. We worked with our local, what is it? Someone on the call will know, but salmon enhancement program to do some infrastructure down on our creek. So, you know, we just went after it. And I think there's, for everybody on this call who's trying to do this, you know, we can all feel in our bones the sort of exhaustion of one more permit or one more form, you know, that you've got to fill out. And I think early on, we just braced ourselves and said, we're just going to do it. We're just going to do the permit. You know, we're just going to fill out the form. and it was important to have team members on, you know, in our sort of company matrix who were up for that. So I've got to commend those folks, because there are a lot of resources out there. You just have to have this sort of capacity to go after them. And I think I'm involved in quite a few conversations right now locally about more equity and access and inclusion and diversity in the farm community. And a lot of it is about this accessing the power map and the sort of resource map. And if you don't have people in your sort of farm team who have the time to go after that, that's a genuine challenge, and where the relationship network is so important. Partnerships, you know, on our land now, where we're at is we have 50 acres and a couple of crucial partnerships there. The land was protected by our local land trust with conservation easements that helped us early on with financing, but also with a lot of relationship building with local investors. The whole development of Fin River, which is now a sort of multi-million-dollar endeavor, at least, yeah, at least in debt, is it's all locally financed. So we have no really bank loans that have financed our expansion of our operation. It's through a local investor network called Lion, which is a whole nother seminar, but that has been a breakthrough for our company. It started when we tried to buy this farm to begin with, and the bank wouldn't lend to us. So the owners of the property said they would carry our contract. And we were like, what is that? Carry our contract. And once we understood what that meant, we have used that same model to do a lot of really creative financing. And then on the property itself, we invited a bunch of partners onto the land with us so that when visitors did come out, you know, what is thought of as tourism really converted more to like education and transformation. We wanted people to see solutions at work, organizations that are really building, I think, a more sustainable, at least aspiring for a more sustainable future. So our partners on the land are the Organic Seed Alliance that does seed research, Essential Blooms that does organic flower seed, the North Olympic Salmon Coalition, which does riparian restoration, and others. So anyway, there's a whole list. But so we really tried to invite other people to actually occupy the land with us, so their story could be part of ours. Our stories could be interlinked. What am I missing? There's a lot more, but that's some of it.
Great. And just so you all know, I'm going to do my best to try to capture all the links that are floating about on the chat, and I'll send them out along in that follow-up email. I have a couple questions for Amy. Do they have a USDA inspector present for the slaughter? You're on mute there, Amy.
Sorry about that. Yes, there is a USDA inspector on site for all of the slaughter times.
Cool. And also, do you have an evisceration room on your property?
An evisceration room for the chickens?
I was hoping you'd know what that means.
So when we do our broiler harvest, we have a set up an area there, and we do have a small building that is undercover that we can use. But that's working with WSDA to have that set up. As you know, they'll come and inspect and tell you what's expected and what's needed. So that's a partner that's working with WSDA to sort out the details of what you need to do.
Great. Can you explain a little bit more about the B Corp tax exemption?
Yeah, we need to be real clear. B Corp does not create a tax exemption. This is not a federal program. This is it's more like some sort of private association that does this kind of sustainability certification. There is something in Washington, and maybe one of the legal folks on the call can speak to it, called a social purpose corporation, which is which is a legal designation, but I also don't think confers a tax exemption. So B Corp is really just a voluntary certification that allows you to write into your operating agreement and your business kind of bylaws that you are working on a triple bottom line, and it protects your shareholders if you, or it communicates to your shareholders if you had them, or your investors or your community partners, that you are not just working towards an economic bottom line. I mean, many farmers on here are just trying to survive. So, you know, Patagonia is a B Corp, right? So they have a different scale of conversation they're trying to have with their shareholders than we are. But we felt like it was a way to role model a way of doing business that was, how do they say? B Corp says, doing business as if people in place mattered. So Fearn River kind of got big enough that we felt like we needed to stake out that was our commitment to our community. But yeah, there's no tax exemption, unfortunately.
And Raymond, why was it so important to you as a restaurateur to work with your local farms in Orcas Island?
One of the reasons, a good example was the other day of just having a simple hamburger and eating it and having it not be the hamburger from Blum Farm. I mean, I think one of the things with us, the island here, we've got ideal growing conditions for just whether it be livestock or growing a carrot, like whichever. Our soil here, our climate here is just great. And, you know, so this is the first and foremost reason for me, just because we get the quality. And I want to buy from someone down the street because, you know, my lettuce, for example, I can get if I'm open tonight, I get my lettuce this morning, and it's just after it's picked. And you know, somebody eats a salad that night, you literally taste the field almost. And it is such a huge difference. And, you know, one thing where Amy was talking to, and one of the reasons especially their beef in particular, or lamb or goat or any of the meat that I get, one of the best things that they have there with that mobile slaughter is the fact that her animals they're not under stress at all. And in the final product, you taste that, both in the taste and tenderness and everything, because those animals, they're right there. They're on their own farm. They haven't had to be loaded up into a truck. They haven't had to go anywhere. They're just, you know, they've died under a zero stress condition. It's great for the animal. You know, one of the benefits in this day and age where we all love to talk about that is I can go to the table and talk to my customer and, you know, just point down the road. That's where Amy lives. Just if you drive 5 minutes, you're at her house, kind of thing. And that's a nice story. But for me as a chef, it's the quality.
And Amy, this is the last question because we're right up on time though. Why is it important for you to work with a local restaurant?
I feel like growing food and sharing that food locally and getting there's so much, just keeping that food chain close. And so raising food and selling and working with our local restaurants and our local consumers here on the island or wherever you are close by keeps your environmental footprint down. Your food isn't traveling, it's fresher, it's healthier, and it's building relationships. It's not just about a hamburger. It is a relationship with your neighbors, with your local businesses, with your community. It's community building. So it's not just about having food that you're selling, it's building a community. And I find that is compelling and very important.
That was the perfect ending. You nailed it. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you so much to Dr. Chase and to all of our panel, and to Trevor and to Lisa. You guys were amazing. And thank you again, Crystie, Raymond, and Amy for joining us. And thank you all to all the attendees. This was a fantastic discussion. Like I said, I'm going to send out a follow-up with a link to the recording. I'm going to capture as best I can much of the chat along with the links, and I will be sending those things out over the next few days. So thanks again, and I hope you all have an amazing day.
Thanks very much.
You got it. Thanks.